Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Ask Shane Anything. I love doing this show, and it happens because some of y'all are pledging at $7 or more per month at patreon.com/SIFTD. Now, everybody gets to watch the show as long as they're pledging $4 or more per month, and everybody gets to ask questions, but if I get down to 2 questions and I can't decide which one to include, I almost always side with the person who's pledging at the higher amount. I think you guys can understand that. We have a great week of gaming, so I appreciate you taking some time to watch this show or listen to this show. We have 4 questions today. Let's get to them. Okay, first up, we have a question from the one and only Kevin. How often does your wife watch you play games? Has she ever been so interested in a game that you played that she watched you play the whole game from beginning to end? What is her favorite game? That's an interesting question that I am surprised no one has ever asked through all this time. I guess the way I could describe my wife's relationship with games is it's friendly, but she's not particularly interested. So it used to be a little different. Back when I first launched street level gaming and I was covering the N64 and Dreamcast, she was more into it then. And a lot of that was because I would have people over to our place all the time. We've been together for a long time. And I would have people over to our place all the time, and we would play N64 and Dreamcast. And she would get involved. She would play Mario Kart 64. She never really played GoldenEye or Perfect Dark, but she played a lot of Mario Kart back then. And of course, she would always play as Peach. So if I had to say what her favorite game is, it probably has to be Mario Kart 64. She didn't race so much, but she loved playing the battle mode. So that's probably her favorite game. And then, once I really got into the industry and moved out here to California and started going to Japan, I would always buy her cool gaming stuff when I would go to Japan, hoping to convert her. It worked a little bit. I got her a GBA, the clamshell design GBA, and I got her, the Princess Peach game, and I bought her probably 5 or 6 games, I would say, throughout the years, but now they just sit in a closet collecting dust. She doesn't really play at all anymore. She's not even really into mobile games or anything. Now, as far as her watching me play games, she doesn't have a choice. So at night, I'm playing games, and we have a little setup in our living room where I'm playing stuff on the TV. She has her Mac PC or her Mac computer that she sits at, and she does her thing, shopping or surfing online or whatever she does. And while that's happening, she has her back turned to the TV. But one thing I've learned is I can use her as a barometer for game audio. Because if something happens in the game I'm playing enough that makes her spin around and look at it, that's when I know either the audio is really good or really bad. Because sometimes she'll spin around and be like, oh my god, that song's awesome. Or I love that character's voice or something like that. Sometimes she spins around and is like, oh my god, turn it down. So in that way, she helps me kind of figure out whether the audio to the average person is something that is kind of unnoticeable or catches their eye in either a positive or negative way. As far as her watching me play games, every once in a while, I will be playing something and she'll be like, ooh, that's pretty, or wow. I think the last one that really caught her eye was Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. She actually watched me play a good bit of that just because the visuals were so colorful, and she's watched the films, and I wouldn't say she's into it, but she knows it. And a lot of the stuff I play, she has no idea what it is. So I think if there's a little bit of that familiarity there, then she attaches to it a little bit more. So she watched me play that for a little bit, but usually what happens is she'll just catch something out of the corner of her eye on the TV, and maybe she'll stop and kind of check it out for a little bit, and she'll make a one-word comment, pretty, or oh wow, that's really gross. So it's more stuff like that, and it's pretty funny. She's privy to watching me play all these games before they come out. I have not had her sign an NDA. I can absolutely trust her 1,000,000% with the stuff that I'm playing in front of her. It's kind of funny to think about. She is privy to checking out video games that most people don't get to see until they release, and she does not care at all. She's just whatever. I'll be like, oh, this game doesn't come out for a week and a half. She'll be like, okay, whatever. So that's kind of her relationship with games. We have fun when we go to arcades together. She doesn't play a ton of arcades, but we have a wicked rivalry at air hockey. My wife tries to say she's not competitive. She's competitive at anything she's good at. If she's not good at something, then she says she's not competitive. So she doesn't feel bad when she doesn't win. Air hockey, miniature golf is something else that she's really good at, and she competes with me hard at. I've kind of been whooping her butt at air hockey over the last few years, though. We have kind of a running tally going between the two of us. So she does like going to arcades. She likes going to Dave and Buster's and playing like the big, crazy shooting arcade games and stuff like that. She's just definitely not like a core console handheld gamer. So that's good enough for me. Like, I feel like to have a healthy relationship, you can't be the same. You need to be different. Otherwise, life gets really boring. And so I feel like we kind of snap together pretty well as far as like I play a ton of games. She's moderately interested in them, but not offended by them. And it's totally okay with me playing them because obviously it's my job. So I think we have a pretty healthy relationship where video games are concerned. And it has spanned many, many console generations. All right. Next up, we have a question from Ben. Hi Shane, could you give us a sense of SIFTD's next steps? Have you ever considered condensing the operations down to just GameFace? My Patreon contributions have always been to support and get access to GameFace, which I regard to be the best video game podcast around, no hyperbole. First of all, Ben, thank you for those kind words. They mean a lot to me. And I'll get to how they mean a lot to me here in a question in a little bit and why they mean a lot to me. And look, I know that anyone who's using SIFTD has been around the block. You guys have watched and listened to a lot of gaming podcasts. So anytime I get a compliment from you guys about anything that we do, I really take it to heart and I really appreciate it. So thank you. It means a lot to me. Second of all, what is the plan for SIFTD? So right now, we are in the middle of replatforming. I know I mentioned this on GameFace a few weeks ago that we were going to replatform that weekend. That didn't happen. The person who's helping us with that is predisposed right now. He's doing some other stuff and he hasn't been able to do it. And that's kind of been our theme for a really long time here. A lot of the root of the problems with SIFTD always goes back to money. So we had site engineers. We've had 3 or 4 of them throughout the years, people who build new stuff into the site for us or fix problems and things like that. But the problem is that we can't afford to keep anybody full time. So we are always working with people who have other jobs and other responsibilities. And obviously, I completely understand that their other job comes first. And so lots of times we start working on stuff or we have plans on stuff. And then the person who's supposed to work on it gets pulled away at their job, their day job, and they can't do it. And that has just been a consistent issue from the beginning. It's why it took so long to build SIFTD in the first place. It's why I disappeared for like 18 months, 2 years, and came back and was like, hey, I've been working on this website all this time. The site was supposed to be done way earlier than it ended up being done because Brent had another job and he had to do stuff at his other job. And the same thing has happened with every site engineer that we've had. They've always had another gig and we're second fiddle. And I totally understand it, but it makes it very hard to get things done. If you remember, we had a whole plan for SIFTD 2.0 to launch that I had literally worked on for like 6 months. Building all these brand new shows, getting all these new graphics done, relaunching the website. Remember, SIFTD used to be a 2-column webpage, and now it's 3. It looks a lot better that way. So there was like a big shift for SIFTD 2.0 that never happened because COVID hit and we were unable to launch everything the way we were supposed to. It was just another thing in the history of SIFTD where you're just like, really? Did that really happen to us? Because don't forget, we just got hacked earlier this year. That was a nightmare. Like, this is something that has been going on behind the scenes that I don't get you guys involved with that has been an absolute nightmare. It took us 6 months just to get the payment portal back up. I lost so much money in donations through that. Like, you guys used to donate all the time, and last year we had our best year of donations ever by a mile. And then we start this year, we get hacked basically the first week of February. The donation portal goes down. It takes us 6 months just to get the donation portal back up. And since we put it back up, we've got 1 donation. And it really sucks because it was a big a part of our revenue for last year. And I was really just pushing to get that portal put back up. And like, since we put it back up, it's like, why did we bother? So it just feels like SIFTD has just been one thing like that after another, and pretty much all of it goes back to money. So anyway, back to your question, like what is the plan for SIFTD and with GameFace? And you asked a bunch of other questions too about the site versus like somebody on YouTube. I had to cut your question down to fit in the graphics basically, but I'll try to address some of that stuff. So where is SIFTD headed? Right now, we're trying to replatform because we have an issue with our site that has been there for a long time. There's a memory leak on the site. And so every so often we have to go through a procedure to basically reset things. site will run like grease lightning for a couple weeks, and then over time the memory leak, we have to reset everything again. We don't want to do that anymore, so we're replatforming. And we've been trying to do this now for what feels like 2 months. It just keeps getting delayed. But once the replatforming happens, then we can start doing some new stuff. And again, I'm very reluctant to share stuff that we're working on or doing for the site, because I feel like I do that and then it doesn't happen. Because again, our site engineer has some other project that he or she has to work on, and our stuff just falls by the wayside. And here I end up with egg on my face saying, hey, we're doing this and it's coming on this day, and then it doesn't show up. And so anyway, I try to avoid doing that. Having run this business now for like 8 or 9 years, I've kind of figured out how things work. So I try to avoid doing that if at all possible. So all I'm going to say is that once the replatforming happens, we have a bunch of changes and tweaks that are coming to SIFTD. And one of them is something that we've needed from day one. And that's a big part of the plan. But again, I don't want to put it out there, because then you're going to hold me to it. And I totally understand that. So that's why I don't want to put it out there. But all I'm going to say is we're very close to doing the replatforming. Once that happens, things can start happening as far as like adding things to the site and doing new things that, again, I don't want to share exactly what I'm doing. Now, to your point about game face, would I ever consider just stripping everything down to game face? Of course I've thought about it, because look, there's no denying that game face is our biggest product. It used to be that game face was here and then Pactor Factor was here, but for whatever reason, Pactor Factor has just went, and game face has gone up. So there's no doubt that it is the product that most people sign up for, and it's the reason most of our patrons subscribe. I've thought about it many times, I guess is what I'm saying to you, because the other thing that I feel like we need to be doing is shorts. We need to be cutting out little snippets of game face and putting them up on our Twitter feed and on our YouTube page and on our Facebook page. Those are the things that get shared and go viral, and you get new people that way. And a lot of people tell me the YouTube algorithm really favors it. I know all this stuff. I know we need to do it. I just can't do it. Like, I would probably have to drop this to do it. I would need all day today to do it, because I'll just be honest with you. I've reached a point where, like, I'm not working 7 days a week anymore. I refuse to. I'm not making enough money to work 7 days a week. It's ridiculous. So I will work 6 days a week and have at least one day off. So tomorrow, my whole day is going to be playing games. And I'll do it all day Sunday too. I try not to consider that work, but it is. I mean, it's me having to do stuff to make money that, otherwise I wouldn't have to do. So that's work. So I do end up working 7 days a week no matter what, but I want one day off where I'm not doing any of like the data entry and the job part of my job. And so I don't have time to do that, because not only it's a lot of time. So I have to listen to the show again. I have to write down time code of the stuff that I'd want to clip out, and then you have to clip it out and you have to edit it all together and you have to publish. It's a big time suck. So there's so many things that I know SIFTD needs to do, and I know people get frustrated because Shane isn't doing what he should be doing. There's so much stuff going on behind the scenes you guys have no idea about that keeps that from happening. So have I considered making it all about game face? Absolutely. Do I think it would be the right idea? Maybe. I've considered it, but it's the fear there is you stop doing Pactor Factor or you start doing Ask Shane Anything, and we lose all the people who are pledging at that higher tier of Ask Shane Anything, so you lose all that money. You lose all the Pactor Factor money, people who are just pledging for Pactor Factor. And it's not easy to get patrons back, man. Like, once you lose patrons, it's hard to get them back. Because how do you do it? There's no way to market to those people to get them back. And Patreon is abysmal. It doesn't market anybody. And that's one of the reasons we joined Patreon, because they told me they're going to do a huge feature story on SIFTD about how, hey, this guy from MTV is starting his own thing on Patreon. And at that point, I was like an anomaly. That stuff just didn't happen very often. And they're like, oh, yeah, man, we got this all lined up. As soon as you launch, 2 days later, we'll do the interview. And then they just bailed. I'm not a fan of Patreon, if you can't tell. I really regret actually going to Patreon after all this time. So anyway, yes, I've considered making game face the only thing. You asked another question, too, about the website. Should we keep the website going? I don't want to talk too much about that because of what I was saying earlier about kind of a big project that we're kicking around and trying to make happen. I don't want to bail on the website until the possibility of this happens. And that's just the truth. I also, look, I like creating a home for our people. Like, I want some place for you guys to go where you feel like it's a home where you can go and you're not going to get harassed. And you said in your question that the part I had to cut out was that, like, you just use YouTube. And cool. Like, if you're happy with YouTube, more power to you. Would not be. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are not. And those people, I think, are people who want to interact with other human beings online about games. I could see where it's like, oh, I set up my subscriptions and I'm getting the stuff that I really want. I understand that, but look, I have all those subscriptions too. That's a horrible system, Ben. It's horrible. You're still inundated with a bunch of stuff that you don't really want to watch right then. You're still sorting through all that crap. And Sifted cuts through all that. I can still understand why you think that your YouTube subscriptions are good enough. I can totally get that perspective. I disagree with it. I think Sifted is a better way to consume video game content, but I think more importantly, it's about the community. It's about adults talking about video games. If you have no interest in interacting with people, I could also see where YouTube would be fine. But if you do, YouTube is awful. It is awful. We basically okay every comment that goes on our YouTube channel. Because if we didn't, it would just be covered in just trash. People just with one word comment. It's awful. So I wanted to create a home for people like me, older people who love games, who are tired of dealing with kids and toxic people and racists and trash. And that's what I've done. I've created an oasis here. So if you're watching this right now and you're tired of dealing with all the idiots on YouTube, go to sifted.net and sign up. It's free. You don't have to pay any money to use the website. Go there, you tell us what you like, and we give you a custom feed of content. And then you can interact with people around that content who are adults, who mostly act like adults. I'm not saying there's never arguments or disagreements on Sifted, but they're handled mostly far more civilly, and they're way less frequent. Usually when something like that happens, it's over like a big topic. It's not over just some stupid video game trailer like you see people freaking out about on YouTube. So anyway, if you're ready to grow up and you still love video games, come to sifted.net. That's why I spent a ton of money out of my pocket to do it, was to try to give something back to the people who have given me so much through the years, supporting me throughout my career. So that's where I'm at with Sifted. There's a bunch of stuff cooking, bubbling behind the scenes. It could be gigantic and change everything, or it could just never happen. And that's kind of been the way Sifted has been all along. However, through all the trials and tribulations and everything, here we are, kind of creeping up to our 10th anniversary. Think about that. Okay, our next question comes from Cinetike. Now that you've had your new PC for a while, how do you feel about high frame rate gaming on the PC versus 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second on consoles? Here's the thing, Cinetike. I have not been able to play my PC much for pleasure. I've recorded Angerfoot B-roll on my PC for last week's Game Face, but otherwise, I haven't used it that much just to play for fun. And I mean, that's another thing I would say is like, I don't get to do that very often. It's very rare that I get to just put in a game and play it because I want to play it. It's always because I have to play it so that we can cover it on the show. So I haven't really had much of a chance to just enjoy my PC, I guess is the way I would put it, so far anyway. And also when I record footage for Game Face, I have to record it at 30 frames per second so that when we put it into the TriCaster, it looks and plays as good as possible. And it does make a huge difference. Even when I'm recording footage for Game Face, I don't get to experience the 120 frames per second, or my PC with my monitor and everything right now is capable of 144 hertz. So I don't get to do that very often, unfortunately. But the times that I have, like, it doesn't make that much of a difference to me. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes, like, if I'm watching somebody play a PC game that's like at 190 million frames per second, like, it almost makes me sick. Because the mouse is like jerking all over the place, and it's like when you play it, it's like your brain's following it because you know what your hand's doing, but when you're watching it, you don't know what the player's gonna do, and I don't like it. It's very weird. Like, I will never, like, sometimes I need to get B-roll from other people, and we always credit people when we do that. Like, I will never run B-roll in Game Face of somebody playing on a PC that's running at like 1,000,000 frames per second, because it looks awful. It's just like this jerky thing where it's not good for broadcast quality footage. So anyway, don't have a lot of experience with it so far. I mean, obviously in the past I've played games that crazy frame rates or whatever. I kind of understand how it is. But with my workflow and the way I need to capture footage and play games, it just hasn't worked out for me yet. So I remember what it was like when I had my GTX 1080 and I first got it and I could play old games with high frame rates. So it's not like I've never experienced it at all. Just unfortunately with the way the workflow goes and stuff like that. And then aesthetically, I'm just not a big fan of it either. So to be honest with you, Cinetyke, like I haven't really had a chance to use my PC in that way. Maybe check back with me in a couple months or something like that. And I'll have a better perspective and probably a better answer for you. Okay, our final question of this episode of Ask Shane Anything comes from Gino Mike 1. After so many years of doing this show, is there one question that you're surprised no one has ever asked you? And if yes, what's the answer to that question? Thank you for all you do. Cheers. Cheers to you, Gino Mike, and thank you very much for the kind words. I really appreciate it. And you kind of just said something that I wish I could hear more often. Now, I have been working from home for a long time. It's been a couple years now since we've had a studio. And look, even when we had studios, it's not like every day I would go into our office and I would work with other people with SIFTD, but I was working in office buildings where there were other people. And I think just generally what I miss from that environment, and something that I haven't really get from you guys, is like, how are you doing? Nobody ever asks me how I'm doing anymore. This is something that I really miss about working in an office with other people, is coming in the morning, saying hello to everybody, asking them how they're doing, people asking me how I'm doing, all that kind of stuff. You don't realize how important it is until it goes away. And I've been dealing without it for a really long time. Nobody on this site ever asks me how I'm doing. Even if I go back to some of the horrible things that have happened, like with the break-in where we lost pretty much everything, it still hurts my heart to think about all the video games I lost in that. Like the gear and stuff, that stuff doesn't bother me anymore. It's the video games that they stole that really hurt still. That was my collection, man, that I had collected for like 15 years, and they took it all. Remember that big wall of games I had behind us in our first set for Game Face? That hurts still. And then, let's see. Then we just had the hack that happened not that long ago. And then we had the death of my dad and my sister in a car accident, which just coincided with a time where we were like make or break with SIFTD. I came back to work like less than 48 hours after my dad and my sister died in a car accident. Because I had to. I felt like the business was going to fail. People don't care. And that's very disheartening, I would say. Like, after that stuff happened, people would be like, I'm sorry, my condolences. But, like, nobody ever followed up, like, 2 days later and said, are you okay, Shane? Are you doing all right? Like, there are some shows where I was, like, cracking up crying. And still, people would watch me break up crying and would not ask me if I was okay. And it's like, I'm not trying to put guilt on anybody or anything like that. It's just the way it is. Like, people look at people like me and what we're doing, and I don't feel like people feel that we're like humans. We're just like a machine that's there to keep creating the content that you want to watch, and we're human beings, man. We have feelings. When you guys say mean stuff about us, it matters. It makes a difference in our lives. When you guys say nice stuff, it makes a difference in our lives. And I feel like that's kind of lost in the whole influencer content creator thing that's happening. And I'll be honest with you, I felt like we created deeper connections, even online, 10, 15 years ago. And I think that's why you guys are here, because we created that connection way back when, and we still have it to this day. I don't feel like I create those connections anymore. Like, it's very hard for me to think of too many people that are big users of SIFTD who haven't followed me for a really long time. Like, I wish there were more new people on SIFTD that I've only known for like a year or 6 months or whatever. It just feels like everything is very impersonal anymore. And again, I'm not blaming anybody personally. It's just kind of the way things are in general. And so, yeah, I wish somebody would ask me every once in a while how I'm doing. And the other thing too is that when you work by yourself, like, you never get like, good job. And I'm not like the type of person that's like, I need that constant validation of the things that I'm doing. Obviously I don't, or I wouldn't have lasted this long working on SIFTD. But again, I am a human being and I do have feelings. And every once in a while, it's nice to have somebody pat you on the back and say, you did a damn good job there. And I will say this, you guys give me a lot more than that than you do of the how are you doing stuff. So I guess that's what I would say. It's like people just don't seem to care about the mental health or the happiness of the people that they watch online. And it's not just you guys. It really feels like everybody. I don't know what the answer to the problem is. There may not be one. Okay, that's it for this week's edition of Ask Shane Anything. Thanks to everybody who asked amazing questions. Thanks to everybody who pledges at patreon.com/sifted. Thanks especially to those of you who are pledging at $7 or more per month. That's why this show is happening. So thank you. While you're at it, head on over to sifted.net right now. Sign up, become a part of the community. You won't regret it. And while you're there, head to the header. Right at the top of the homepage, there's a link there to ask me questions. Go there and ask me some questions, and I'll try to get them into next week's show. One thing before I go, we have figured out now that Game Face is happening on Wednesday of next week. Matt is out of pocket and can't do it, so we are shifting the show to Wednesday of next week, so I will see you then.